Voila. All right. Welcome, everyone. Once again, this is Accuracy in America. I'm Don Irvine, and I'm joined yet again by Brian McNicoll.
Good morning. Hello, deplorables, dregs, despicables, and dog-faced pony soldiers.
I just never get tired of hearing that. I get that every week. How lovely. All right. 97 days until the election. We'll talk a little bit about that, but the clock is ticking. But let's just talk about a couple of things here. President Trump has signed this executive order about prescription drug pricing and everything like this. I'm not really sure that this is really a conservative principle here. I mean, I know it seems like price control to me. I don't know, but it does have some support, but I'm not sure it has a lot of Republican support. I mean, can you explain this a little bit?
So he has signed orders that say that you cannot charge Americans more for drugs than they are paying, than the price that the drug companies charge for them overseas, which, sounds like a good idea, right? But, we're basically paying for the world's R&D. In drugs, and as a result, we have much more access to drugs than the rest of the world. We get all the treatments first. We're the biggest beneficiaries of the research, but by doing that, you're cutting off that incentive. It's a brave new world. There's a lot of unintended consequences in that. He is supporting reimportation, which means we sell drugs to Canada or buyers in Canada. It's usually the provinces. If they have leftovers, they can sell them back. There's always been concerns about, do those drugs go out of power or lose their power if you wait to sell them back? That's kind of that's a claim I would not worry a whole lot about. I think they found a few years ago, they found a bunch of drugs from the 60s, and they tested them, and they were 98% of their original power or something. Drugs don't really degrade that much as people make out. They make out more because they want to be able to sell you new drugs. And a couple more were just like freeing up making of, what can be made and what can be sold overseas and what can be sold here. So it lets some foreign drugs in the country. It forces a little price competition. It's an election year move. It's things that probably could not have passed through Congress, even piecemeal, maybe a few elements of them. But right now, Congress is kind of locked on drug pricing reform. And he can say he did something about it, or at least try to do something about it. Unintended consequences, we'll have to all wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, is this something that is much more of something that you would have expected a Joe Biden to do or have pushed through if he had been president than a Donald Trump?
No, one more he did that I want to leave out is he asked for to reduce the price of insulin, which is a big story, right? Because it ends up, a lot of the insulin is doled out by government-run clinics, health facilities, paid for by the government. So, and there are people who miss out on insulin sometimes because, the price can be very high. It's one of those things, depends on where you're getting it. The price can differ by, 1,700%, right? There was someone told me they could get insulin for $4 and someone else told me it was $68 for the same amount. So, that's a lot of difference there. So I think that particular thing, I don't know what it will do to the insulin market. Again, unintended consequences, we don't know. But, that is sort of a winner to a lot of people who have diabetes, obviously.
So, I mean, who are the people that were supporting this, though? I mean, are these consumer activist type of thing like this? I mean,
see, I don't think that there was a big push, like, there was some group getting him to do this. I think that he came up, he's worked on reducing drug prices ever since he's been in office. And last year was the first time in like 75 years that we spent less on drug prices, buying drugs than the year before. So, he has started to have some impact on stuff. And, it's thing he's always been interested in, because it's like a trapped expense. The other thing he did on that front was the base ingredients of a lot of medicines. They weren't made in the United States anymore, right? That had been outsourced. It's a what do you call it? Commodity, right? So one is the same as the other, so you can manufacture it anywhere you go where the manufacturing labor costs are least. But he has taught Kodak, which is based in Corning, New York, one of the most high tax states in the country, into converting a lot of its business into making the base drugs. So Kodak, the camera company, is now going to be making the basis, the things that get put in to combine to make drugs, the elements of the basic elements.
That was really surprising. I'm glad you kind of brought that up, because I had kind of was wondering whether or not we should talk about that. But, I was completely unaware that these things were going on. Kodak basically went bankrupt. I mean, like a lot of these, long time companies.
It took a lot of the communities along, Corning, Rochester, the Kodak funded a lot of research, RPI, the colleges there in Rochester and so forth. A lot of like the things along the Southern Tier Expressway and the things along the New York Thruway were hurting because of what happened to Kodak. It dominated New York business at one time, and now, outside of the city, the upstate part of New York. And so, that's a big thing to get Kodak back running to help New York State.
Right, and it's not the same Kodak. I mean, it was really kind of a shell of its former self. We've seen a lot of these companies where kind of the name or the companies are sold off. I mean, and so, it was, I didn't even realize that they actually still had a publicly traded stock, because that was what was part of the lead story. Was I think the stock jumped like 50% on this announcement. And, you're kind of like, wow, Kodak doing this, but in a lot of ways, this is great to bring this thing, home, because there had been a lot of complaints, particularly since, Trump has taken office, and his focus on China, about how many drugs were made overseas, and a lot of things have been going on, anywhere from your average person to your conspiracy theory, type of person, about the efficacy of having the Chinese make our drugs and all of these kinds of things. I think this does make probably makes a lot of people a lot happier. Plus, it's going to improve, to a certain degree, small degree, at least at the beginning, employment. This Kodak remaking themselves like this will be really fascinating to see.
That is a solution that, like, you would never see Biden come within a million miles of, right? He's just not, he thinks about what can the government do. It's like Biden's introduced was to spend $700 billion to help women economically, okay? Before the pandemic, unemployment for women was at a 70-year low. Wages were rising the fastest for women they had ever risen since they've been tracking that statistic. And we had 1.5 million more jobs than we had job seekers. I mean, you couldn't have done any more for women economically than what Trump was doing. And now Biden wants to do it with government money. Oh, we'll have a government program for this and a government program for that. It's like, do it organically. Have the economy produce this itself. And that's what he has done. That's what he's doing here. Like this connection to the corporate America and getting them involved in solving big national problems is almost without parallel in American history. I guess in World War II, we had to kind of do it. But, the country was a lot different situation then. There was a lot fewer people to corral and a lot more focus and unity on the mission than there is now. So what he's done there is unbelievable if you look at it in the modern context.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just thinking, I seem to recall on one of the episodes of The Apprentice what Kodak was actually featured, because I think they had a photo printer or something. I can't remember what it was at the time, but when they were trying to move into the digital space, because Kodak for most of us, it's the little Instamatic cameras, it's the actual film, not the digital kind of a thing. They really got waylaid, by the digital revolution. They didn't keep up, with this at all. and found themselves, no longer, in the prime. No one needed a Kodak. No one needed a Kodak film anymore. I mean, there are still the real photographers or certain film that they still need and want and swear by, that you cannot produce digitally anything close to the images you can produce with some of the specialized professional type of film. But nevertheless, this is interesting to see how this company is remaking itself. And, maybe that fits in with President Trump's, Make America Great Again. It's like, let's make Kodak great again. It's a great American name.
Yeah. And when digital imagery had gotten to the point where that market was sliced down very, very narrow. The people who need resonance beyond what digital photography could produce are, it's like, it's just fine for newspapers. And that was a big, customer of Kodak, or newspaper photography department. So, it got to the point where they were irrelevant on a lot of scale. So, this is a big thing for them, and it's a big thing for New York State.
Yeah, it really is.
He does a lot of stuff to make Cuomo look good.
I was going to say.
He doesn't seem to be able to overcome Cuomo, who just insists on not looking good.
Yeah, Cuomo should send him a thank you card, but that ain't going to happen. All right. Yeah, instead, Cuomo they paint Black Lives Matter in the front of Trump Tower, right?
Right.
That's kind of the relationship they have.
Although there's now a lady, I guess that she's going around and pours black paint over it. They have to keep repainting it because she keeps redoing it.
And I wonder, I kind of wonder, okay, so they consider that, I guess, a criminal act, when you do that. But how much money are they spending to kind of, trying to repaint this thing over and over and over again?
Right. And why does that get to happen? Okay. So a couple of things on that. One is, what Republican ran for mayor of New York? I don't know. Do you know?
No, I don't remember.
DC?
Yeah.
Detroit? LA, right? If you're not going to run for these offices, you're not going to win them, right? And so part of what's going on in the country now is for Trump to execute his strategy against the virus, to get schools reopened, to get drugs distributed properly. And, it requires cooperation with local officials. And Republican Party abandoned those seats, right? It tries to win some state legislature seats, right? However, in Virginia, we have 144 members of the state legislature, and I think 45 of them ran unopposed. Democrats ran unopposed. So, Virginia is not a hardcore blue state. People think it is, but I mean, it just tipped over in the last session to being controlled by Democrats. So it's reversible, but you got to run. You can't give them 45 seats unopposed, right? So one of the things that, I hope that Brad Parscale and whoever the new guy is and so forth, I guess, Stepien, will focus on is, I was glad to find out, I don't think he's related to the Stepians that ran the Cleveland Cavaliers, which I think is good considering that was not the successful part of Cavalier history. But you got to build this at the bottom, right? You got to get strong candidates into all these races. And yeah, you're going to put some strong candidates up who are not going to win. And you're going to run them next time. They're not going to win again. But if you don't run, if you don't point out the problems with the Democrat candidates, give Portland a choice. You don't think there's people sitting in Portland right now and say, we got to elect someone who will go clean this street out, right? And make it where I can go downtown again. You don't think that would be a popular platform? It'd be daring. It would be hard, and it's the other thing is Virginia, they don't want to mention Trump's name. It's the people who are likely to vote for you, who will vote against Democrats and gun grabbing and suburb wrecking and all this stuff they're for Trump. They're not ashamed to say they're for MAGA and all that. You're saying, okay, we're going to be against the people in power, but we're not really for the thing you're for, just let them do it, right? We are surrendering high ground to them without a fight. So that's one of the things that goes into this.
Yeah, no, and I know we've talked about that aspect of what happened with the Republican Party of Virginia before, just basically giving up, the 45 seats and whatnot. Uh, Something not uncommon in Maryland. I mean, we face a tougher hill to climb there, but there's been a terrible regression in the Republican Party of Virginia where they're not running competitive seats. I mean, look, it's been 10 years since I ran for state senate in Maryland. I knew I was a sacrificial lamb. I didn't mind it. I did, and all this stuff. But the idea is that you put a name on the ballot in the place there. Do not just don't automatically give it away to the other side. Right. Make them fight a little bit for it. Do a little bit of something for it. So that kind of a thing, is necessary. And it's shocking to see how the RPV really has backslid so much on this. This should not be happening in that state. They can turn that around, but they really got to shake up their leadership. They've really got to get on the stick here, because I think you're right. I mean, go out there and tell them what you believe in and stand up for, because there are, a lot of those Democrats who won in Virginia. I mean, they're flawed candidates. I mean, a decent Republican can probably beat them, right? And so this is the problem. And this could wind up being a microcosm of what happens, and we'll discuss this a little bit more maybe in 2020. It's just that, the map itself, doesn't look great for the Republicans if people aren't going to step up and run. Luckily, there are people running, but there are a lot of other issues that are happening in 2020 that are going to make this an unusual election year. But nevertheless, it's just going to be fascinating to see what happens here as the clock continues to tick every day and we learn new things every day. I want to ask you about what's going on here with the stimulus packages. So, the Democrats have their HEROES Act passed back in May, which is worth about $3 trillion, I think, is the price tag on that. The Republican Senate, Mitch McConnell and company, have come up with a package they're calling the HEAL Act, I guess now, and has about $1 trillion worth of expenditures in there. But you already knew that they were going to fight with the Democrats on this anyway. There was a fairly wide divide on a lot of issues, but there are Republicans who are not happy with this as well. From whether or not it's things like the FBI building funding and things like that. But I mean, what's your take in terms of this, and how fast, how much do we need this, and how soon can we get this done, and what are we gonna get done?
Well, the FBI building, you mentioned that's been going on a long time, right? That's been going on since I was on the Hill, 2006, 2007. So, that's a, and I think probably Trump wanted that in there as a bargaining chip. Throw it away, okay, we'll let that go. You let something go. The bill that the Republicans are talking about gives $1,200 checks for each adult, each qualified adult. There's an income limit. If you make over a certain amount, it goes down some. $600 a child. The Democrat bill proposes $1,200 to adults and maybe $1,200 to kids per kid. So it's more on the kids. It's more, you get more money for having kids in the Democrat bill than you do the Republican. There's some financing for some other stuff. It's a hash out situation. None of us are going to like what it ends up being. But I think that there's something in there about extending the unemployment supplement. So what was happening is, if you file for unemployment, you get the normal amount you'd be due plus an additional $600 a month, which was giving a market signal to people to don't go back to work. You'll lose income to go back to work. And AOC's like, well, why can't those guys cash in a little bit every once in a while? Why does it always got to be the people at the top of the market who get this, and that, and the other? But the fact of this is, you're impeding the recovery, right? By not, getting people back to work, right? If you can just sit home with your feet up, that's what people are going to do. So I think there's some of that, and there's some stuff about schools in the Senate bill about having financing to school districts change according to whether they open, whether they follow federal guidelines. So, it'll be interesting to see how it hashes out. It's a debate. I think it will, go into early August getting solved. Obviously, we're pretty close to that now. And the other big issue in there is what are they going to do about at the end of this month? A lot of people are not going to pay rent, and they're not going to be protected by the government stopping people from being foreclosed or evicted. So that's a hot issue that'll have to be dealt with too.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're not out of the woods with the economy. We made some pretty good strides here in the last couple of months. I expect that we'll see some numbers that'll be a lot flatter, next Friday when the unemployment figures come out. That it won't, we won't see the kind of rapid drop down that we had the last couple of months because the reopenings had slowed down and some places had started to close back up again. So that kind of hurt it. The Republicans, I mean, on the unemployment side, their plan is not perfect, but it's a better solution. They were basically saying, okay, look, the last time around, we agreed, because we needed to get something done, $600, and state unemployment systems are just like a lot of other things. They differ. Every state has their own system. And so it would have been very complicated to say, hey, do this, we're going to give you, we want to sit on a formulaic basis saying that to replace a certain amount of the income or whatever and do that. So they gave the $600 flat. But as you said, I mean, it turned out that it was a very big benefit to a lot of people. They wound up with more money not working than working. So the Republicans their fix for this time around is, okay, $200 flat while you work it out to rejigger your system to compute it at 70% of the wages they had before. And that was that gives them some incentive to come back to work, which I think is a good plan. And at $600, I mean, it was already costing us, a ton of money. So $200 or whatever it'll be in the end will still be a lot. It'll be a cost savings for the government, but it'll also be better for people to get them back to work. The eviction thing, that's going to be a tough cookie, because I think, both you and I understand that none of us want to see anybody thrown out of their homes and evicted from their homes because of the hardships of COVID. On the other hand, you can't force the landlords and those people who own these properties to just continue to suck it up because right. What about them? I mean, they've got bills to pay and expenses to pay too. So it's not AOC's big evil people. There are a lot of every ordinary day investors that have money in a lot of these places that would get ruined in essence if this keeps up.
And there's a lot of pension plans that have REITs in them, right. Or real estate investment trusts. So you're saying those people, those invest, and pension plans is regular rank and file workers, and you're saying they're going to miss out.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is a huge ripple effect, domino effect with all of this that happens. I mean, I know the Democrats, one of the other things that they were complaining about the Republican bill was that I think the GOP had put something like $9 billion for COVID testing, and the Democrats have like $75 billion. I mean, COVID testing can be very expensive, right? And this is definitely an expense that corporations and schools and things like that are facing tremendous, expenses going in if they're going to bring people back to campus, bring people back to their office buildings, et cetera, et cetera. But, and so from an election standpoint, I'm like, yeah, I guess I'm like, why not go ahead and throw a bunch of money at least initially say, you're going to spend X amount of dollars. Don't go cheap on the testing because people are paying attention to that stuff. I mean, you can make a campaign issue to an extent about, look, the Republicans only want to spend this amount of money, which is only going to test this many people. We still got a big problem. So I think optics wise, it doesn't sell as well. But, to be personally, to be honest, is like, I'll take another $1,200 per person on the stimulus round after I took that huge pay cut from AIM. It's like, all right, hey, that's like getting a month's worth of net pay.
There you go.
So, whatever works is like, yeah, but it's the future generations that are going to wind up making it, because really all we're really doing right now is printing money. But
Right.
where we haven't paid the price yet is inflation. At some point in time, these policies become inflation.
I wouldn't necessarily say that we haven't had inflation, because like the way they measure inflation has changed. Food is not part of it. And food is the most expensive.
Well, they've always excluded food and energy out of the component when they give you the base price, because those are volatile. Food, gas, things like that, they change. But food, I mean, I will agree with you this right now, especially during the pandemic, food prices have been like shooting up like crazy.
Shooting up. It's terrible. I mean,
yeah. So that's been another thing. Is like just even your basic staples. I mean, any one of us that tried to buy milk, eggs, bread, it's like you never know. First of all, initially, it's like you had to see if you could find it, and then you had to see what price you were going to pay for it. My wife is a particularly she likes to do a lot of things with eggs, but she has a limit to how much she's going to pay for eggs. And when they rocket it up there, she's like, okay, we're just going to do without this for a little while until things settle down, because it was a supply and demand type of a thing like that. But a lot of basic staples just kind of went way through the roof.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have a little bit of this, but we haven't seen the 1980s inflation yet. But I'm just kind of concerned that we're going to start. We've been locked in this 1.5% to 2.5% inflation rate for years. For a long time, it's been relatively low, relatively tame. But at some point in time, it's going to probably start ticking up to 3, 3.5, 4. For a lot of people, particularly younger people, they've never seen that before. They're not going to be younger families.
I mean, we can remember it being 8, 9.
Look. I mean, when back in 1980, I mean, things were so bad. I was earning like 10 to 12% on my money market fund with Fidelity. Okay, and that wasn't keeping up with inflation.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how nuts it was.
Yeah.
So it was great to a certain extent for some seniors who are on fixed income, and when inflation was going, because their Social Security checks were tied to inflation every year, so they were getting some good bumps as a result of that. Having elderly parents, during the time with my father, and then when my mother took over after he died, my mother was getting his benefits, is that her Social Security payments were going up hardly at all, and in a large part were being offset by the increases in the Medicare monthly premium.
Yeah.
So in essence, she was going backwards, as a result of that. But you take that in stride to say low inflation, that's a good thing. You don't want to get into these high inflation and get into the old days of stagflation and the other things that hyperinflation, all the other things that just ruin an economy that we've seen overseas that have decimated economies around the world. All right, let's move on to something which I think you probably will have an opinion of, which is Attorney General William Barr's testimony. That was one of the most contentious. I don't even know how to describe the Democrats' behavior on that, because it was really despicable, maybe.
They went in with a strategy. We're going to say our thing, and when he tries to say anything, we're going to reclaim our time. And it's like they all got the memo. Like, just spew out your accusation, and if he tries to say anything, say, I'm reclaiming my time. Okay, so I guess we talk about these things a lot. So me and you are sitting here talking about things from a pro-Trump, pro-America, pro-Republican in general perspective, right? There's two guys somewhere else on the internet. You shouldn't watch their show. You should watch ours, who are saying the same things from the other side, right? They're anti-Trump. They're whatever. This goes on everywhere. The things you look for is things where you break through, where it's not just the partisan, right? There's actual. You can actually move people who look at this and aren't sure and think about it and go back and forth, right? I think that was one of those moments yesterday, because, they didn't let him give answers, right? And you can say their accusations were good, but even if you're a Democrat and you're watching that, you have to be frustrated with them not letting him talk, right? Because if you're a Democrat, then you think, you know, if he'd have talked, he'd have gotten in even worse trouble, right? It wouldn't just be your accusation, it'd be your accusation and his lame answer, right? But that's not what happened. They cut him off so often that he didn't get to say anything. And, you know, when he did say some stuff, it was pretty devastating. I think he completely won the day. And the people, you know, made the people look shrill and bitter, right? And I'm looking at the internet traffic on this, and I'm not seeing stories that say, boy, the Democrats really stuck it to Barr, right? Even the Post story was, you know, they leveled their accusations. It didn't really say that they made any points, right? And so I think even the left realizes that this was a little too shrill.
Yeah, I mean, didn't he ask for like a lunch break and a bathroom break and you know?
Yeah, and you know, so Nadler said I guess they had 2 more people to question, which is if it's 5 minutes of questioning, it's 10 minutes, right? Maybe 12 minutes total. I don't know that I'm against Nadler on that. I mean, Barr could not have known how much more they had intended to do, right? When he's asking, you know, can I have a break? And I waited an hour on you and so forth. And Nadler's saying, we're almost done. 10 more minutes, 15 more minutes, you're out of here for good. It's hard to like dismiss those hearings and get anybody to come back for the last 10 or 15 minutes. So it kind of, you know, that's sort of a iffy issue, but he did get in a good line about it. Said, you know, classy shop you're running here, buddy, or something like that.
Well, then there was also this other thing I saw. I mean, I guess, you know, when he was being questioned about the use of the federal agents, you know, around the country, and, you know, the Democrats are trying to make hay of this, but I mean, he said something to the effect of like, well, you know, is there, you know, like an indictment or something that's wrong, that we've done wrong or something to that effect? You know, please tell me, you know, what that is. Give me an example of what it is. And, you know, they had nothing. I mean, this is what's amazing about this is that, to me, is that Barr, he was overall, I mean, he was calm, cool, and collected. This is a great way to deal with these Democrats, you know, because they obviously, like you said, they got the memo, they had the strategy. But I think it was the wrong strategy because I think you are right in the sense that, you know, what they should have done is they should have let him speak, because that was where they had an opportunity for him to possibly, you know, go off track a little bit and say something that would be damaging. But they limited him so much, and then he stayed on track. He stayed on track so much, on point, that, you know, they came away with really nothing. You know, the Democrats come off looking a lot worse than Barr did. Barr looked like he was very much in charge, and he was very much in command of the Justice Department and what was going on.
Yeah, he got some good points out too. One of which was, you know, circumstantial evidence is not predicate for an investigation, which, you know, the point he's been making all along, that they are looking into the unmaskings, which apparently most people did not know. They brought in yet another outside U.S. attorney, this one from the Western District of Texas, to look at the unmaskings, who unmasked and were they justified, and any of that criminal. And I will renew my objection to expanding this probe. You know, you need to start showing some results, or, you know, because you're getting to the point with this, and I know there's people on the internet who get all over me about this. Oh, they've got to get their case perfect. They do have to get their case perfect. You cannot indict these people and, you know, have it, oh, there's huge holes in your case and we let these guys walk and you harass them, right? But we are very near the point where whoever they choose to indict out of it, and whatever level of wrongdoing they can prove against them, it's going to be seen as electioneering unless it is put into the public sphere pretty darn soon. One of the people at the hearing, Congress lady from California, asked him if he would commit to not releasing any of Durham's findings until after the election. And she thought she had a gotcha moment. Hey, we're so close already here in late July that, you know, no more damning information can be released about Democrats. And he said, no, he won't do that. And that's fine. He can do that. But they're getting into, you know, if you listen to the Democrats talk about why Hillary Clinton lost in 2016, one of the things they say is, you know, October 27th, you know, Comey comes out and says, well, we are looking at another aspect of the email thing. The book's not closed on that, right? And then he comes back 2 days later and says, we looked at that and it's fine. And, you know, we're back to not wanting to prosecute. Okay. But those 2 days called into question, what was getting hidden and what had she done to get out of being investigated, brought all that stuff back up again. Okay. Now, in fairness to Biden, okay, and the Democrats, if John Durham has discovered some criminality, he needs to say it, right? Because one of his top picks for vice president appears to be Susan Rice. Okay, Susan Rice quite possibly has some criminal involvement in the Obamagate, the Spygate scandal, right? If she does, it's unfair to let him nominate her. Then you're either A, you can't talk about her because you're harming a political person too close to the election, or it gets looked at as electioneering, or B, he gets, he goes full bore thinking that she's okay, and she turns out to have a scandal, right? And he loses because he's chosen a person involved in a scandal. We need to say, is Susan Rice okay, right? Justice dictates that, if he's going to sully anyone who has to do with Biden's campaign, he needs to do it before all this is nailed down so Biden can go in another direction. He doesn't deserve to, have his campaign crippled from outside by, Trump's Justice Department. And that will not play well electorally. If they wait and it's Susan Rice and we go to, October 15th, oh, here's big charges on Susan Rice. People are going to say this is rigged to affect the election. Okay. So people think that you can wait into September and October and do this and spring the big surprise on them. It's not going to work that way. If he knows something, he needs to say it, right? They have kept adding to this investigation, and they've hired half the U.S. attorneys in America to look at various aspects of it. Bring some of this to market, right? Indict some people. Say what you are looking at. Show us the scope, because you're not helping them or us or justice by not doing so.
Right, and I think you've made the point too. I mean, it won't really be worth much if it comes out in November after the election, or
Right. It won't even, who will care at that point?
Right. Yeah. So that'll be interesting. All right. So let's briefly just talk about Portland. I kind of lost track of the days. I think they're on day 61 or 62 or something. I mean, it's just insane, and that mayor up there, Ted Wheeler, I mean, he's locked arms with the protesters, and, he's had his verbal battles with the Trump administration and things like that. But I think even the Portland Police Department has now even declared, some of this as riots. I mean, these are the things, when that happens, that fascinates me, because up to that point in time, the media has always been saying that, well, what are these federal agents doing in there? These are mostly peaceful protests. Though you've got that backdrop of things that are happening at the federal courthouse and all these other things that are going on.
That was one of the things from that hearing is, Jim Jordan's opening statement was an 8.5 minute video. You're only supposed to give a 5-minute opening statement, which Nadler did point out. He said, I hope I never hear an objection to him about the length of my opening statement, which is okay. That's fair game. But, schooled America on the debate over whether these are violent protests, right? They obviously are, and people could see on the screen for themselves, some people for the first time, that it's undeniably a riot. And so what they say in Portland is that there is a protest, and then out of the protest starts a riot. And then the same thing plays itself out every night. Early evening, it's protests, in police brutality, racial equality, all goals we all share. And then at night, it's, bombing the federal building and trying to attack and kill the people inside. And it's a different set of actors. And I think the federal government has responded to that. They enforce differently too. They're not arresting the people, the peaceful protesters. They're arresting the people trying to kill cops, right?
Right.
And, one of the points that Barr made yesterday is, is there no one in the Democratic Party, not one person among you, that condemns attacking a federal courthouse and the federal marshals inside? How can one of our two political parties think that's okay?
Yeah, no, and and the thing too is that I think I saw something yesterday or the day before where even Black Lives Matter leaders have said,
Right.
don't go out at night. right? I mean, if you're going to protest during the day, but don't go out at night, because they basically are admitting that there's a different element that goes back, that those people are rabble rousers. They're the rioters. They're causing problems, and it actually harms the movement if they're out, if
Right.
they're, so, and that's basically what happens kind of right now, is that there isn't a lot of distinction between those people that are kind of lumped into the same. But if the peaceful protesters just basically are kind of like, say, the 8 to 4 or 9 to 5 guys or 9 to 6 guys, and then the rioters come in at night, then you can more easily say, okay, we got to tamp down on these guys. The peaceful protesters we're fine with; they can exercise their free speech. But these guys are trying to bomb, damage, destroy, federal buildings, etc., harm police, different element. They're not interested in BLM or anything else. They're interested in just destruction and mayhem.
Right, and so you're starting to see some cleave there, where because there's some people in Black Lives Matter who are sincere about improving a narrow set of problems in America, and let's hear those voices and let's see what we can work out. Right, we've talked about new ways to arrest people, how to change court procedures, what's really fair.
Right.
I mean, we think on our side about Roger Stone getting 9 years in jail for a process crime. There's a lot of people on the other side who get extreme sentences for crimes that aren't that serious. And let's, how do we guard against that? How do we make all the sentences appropriate to the crimes?
Yeah. All right. Moving on. I want to get your opinion about this. So the Covington Catholic, what is it called? Covington Catholic High School, or anyway, Nicholas Sandmann, who was at the March for Life rally. I guess it was in January 2019. There was a confrontation with a Native American protester who was there for the Indigenous Peoples March. This guy Warren Phillips, and there was a video standing with Sandmann smiling and Phillips beating this little drum and all this kind of stuff, and I guess really Sandmann got he came out looking like the bad guy, that he was preventing this guy from doing things, that he and his friends had harassed this guy and all this. A lot of stuff that had been left out of that was with the role of the Black Hebrews, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of this. So anyway, the family had sued. They sued CNN, which apparently settled earlier this year, and the Washington Post on Friday announced that they had settled for an undisclosed amount with Sandmann. There's still some other suits that are pending. Is this a victory for Sandmann and free speech, kind of a thing like that? There was I saw some traffic yesterday, some stories yesterday about the lawyers for Sandmann saying that they may go after Brian Stelter of CNN, things like that, for talking about the settlement, but nobody knows what the settlement is. I personally suspect that it was an amount that, that everybody agreed to just kind of go away. I mean, they weren't going to pay out, it was a $250 million lawsuit, was nowhere close to that, but something that everybody was satisfied. The lawyers get their cut. Sandmann gets a little bit for himself, but the Washington Post, it's they look at the potential protracted nature of this, and they say it's worth it just to pay something out rather than going down and just having this drag on for who knows how long.
Right, and having those reporters in a trial and their
right. methods
questioned and poured over in public for weeks on end. Yeah, he's going to get some new living room furniture out of this. That's for sure. But someone told me he bought an expensive car. I don't know. Maybe he can. He's got the money, and and he will never. I mean, you think about it. It's like he should save this money, because this is going to be a problem for him professionally his whole life, right? Because he's going to go to a certain amount of employers, and they're going to say, A, you caused a scandal. We don't want scandals caused. We want people who do the work. Or B, you're on the wrong side of the race issue or whatever, whether that's fair or not, he's out there in a way that like me and you are not, right? He's on record in a way that normal people are not. So, he is being paid for some, lost earnings, that I think will affect him in his life as he goes through life. I also think that, and I hope that it chastens reporters, that reporters learn that what they are doing is not, that you can't jump to conclusions. You need to actually nail down facts, right? I think one of the big breakdowns that has happened in the last 15 or 20 years with regard to newspapers is line editors. Okay. Used to be line editors was a pretty highly paid job. So while you didn't hear about those people, they didn't get the glory of newspaper work that, all the president's men got or whatever. They were very valuable in terms of forcing the reporter to actually prove the things that they say. And so now you have, the Washington Post. So this is a story based on 22 unnamed sources. It's like, that can't happen. That's not responsible journalism, right? You get 22 people, you can't get one of them to give their name. Okay. So when they don't give their name, when you learn things from sources that you can't identify, then you don't know, A, did that source witness what they're saying they witnessed? Or B, did they, do they have an agenda? Are they in position to understand what they saw or heard or think they saw or heard? Right? You're not getting those questions anymore. And hopefully, I understand it's probably not going to be 250 million, but hopefully it was enough of a hit in the wallet for the Post and CNN and the other people involved to look at this and say, we need to be more careful about what we're saying about people based on anonymous sources, because that has been a gigantic problem in journalism in the last decade.
Yeah, well, we can only hope on that. And one of the things that always gets me about the story too is just that, my impression from the initial news reports had been that, Sandman and his friends were the instigators of all of this, but really Phillips went to them.
Right.
Sandman and his friends, they didn't go to this guy. This guy went to them.
Right.
And then Sandman, Sandman comes out looking like the bad guy on this. So, I was amazed that, because at first I thought these lawsuits are going to go absolutely nowhere, but to reach an out-of-court settlement says something to me still. I mean, and hopefully, and it does attract some attention. And no newspaper, particularly of national importance, like the Washington Post. I think there's maybe one still pending against the New York Times or an organization like the CNN wants to have that on the record that they actually settled a suit like that. Nevertheless, no matter how it came out, it's just that.
But it's interesting to me that they all went, let's settle and not have a trial and not let this get noisy. That kind of tells you what they think of the accusations.
Right. Exactly. All right. We're running a little low on time, but I do also want to ask you about this thing here too, which is our wonderful Supreme Court, which we had a little bit of a bumpy term in a lot of ways. So one of the things that they had done is that the Democratic governor in Nevada had basically, he was allowing casinos to open with fairly generous restrictions in terms of how many people could be in a casino, et cetera, like this. But he kept a very strict restriction on churches. And the Supreme Court basically sided with the governor, saying that this was fine. You and I have kind of talked about this. It's the churches seem to be getting beat over the head here under the pandemic and all these restrictions.
Right. So there's no opinion supporting the majority position. No one wrote an opinion. So there were some dissents, but there was no one saying this is why we did this. So what I'm about to say is a guess, and it is that the court is determining that the emergency powers government has to deal with crises such as pandemics gives it the wherewithal to say this, to say churches must shut down or limit their people to whatever, and the churches have to comply. Okay. And so they are upholding that power. And I think it's important that governments have that power, because sometimes you do need to place these restrictions. But if you can go to a casino, you can go to church.
Yeah, really.
Right? That's what I think Gorsuch's dissent makes that point. Under no reading of the Constitution can, casinos be open and churches not. Right? It's got to be either we can gather in public or we can't. And we need to work that out as a society, because the right is tolerant of the other side, but the other side is not tolerant of the right. Okay, if they get in control, they have no compunction about outlawing church. Like, you look what's happening on a lot of this stuff. They're compelling political viewpoints, right? And that's what this is. And, I don't see how it stands. There is a John Roberts on the list of people who went to Epstein Island. And so, I'm pinning my hopes that it's that one and we can be rid of him, because he has been bitter disappointment.
It happens,
It's
doesn't
like,
it?
don't let Bushes appoint justices, right?
Yeah, that track record is a little spotty, I guess.
Man.
All right, we're down. Let's go for 2 minutes.
So 2 minutes. There's a couple of things there that I wanted to get to. I still say Biden's VP is Val Demings. I hear the Susan Rice. She has scandal problems. I can't really believe they'll do Kamala with the bitterness they had on stage. So don't plant those China seeds. China is mailing. People are getting seeds in the mail from China, and that they didn't order. There's some speculation that it could be, the people sending the seeds want favorable reviews on the Chinese version of Yelp. I'd say still don't plant them. Fauci's pitch just a little bit outside. The best line I've heard on it was, I don't know if anyone did see it. He threw out the first pitch at the first Washington Nationals game, and it was about 40 feet outside. The catcher didn't even try to catch it. It was so far away. The best line I heard on it is he didn't want anybody to catch anything. So,
Plus we saw those pictures of him sitting in the stands without a mask. Now he was outside, but a lot of people jumped on him thinking he was a hypocrite. I don't necessarily think, if I'm outside, I'm not wearing a mask like that necessarily either.
Well, but he's the guy who gets on and lectures us about it.
Right.
Right?
That's
and he's
the
sitting
problem.
there with people in the next seat, right? Then the first lie that got told about that was that he was drinking water. There's no water in that photo,
Yeah.
You're just making up excuses for the guy, right? If he's going to go around telling all of us, he shouldn't be sitting there watching that game anyway. We're not allowed to watch those games. Like, throw out your first pitch and leave. Why are you allowed to stay in the stands? And so if you're going to stay in the stands, you got to wear masks. You set the example. You're the one who decided what the example is.
Right.
Okay? So,
right.
He's getting very close on a number of areas that I don't think you'll see him much more. I think Trump is getting a belly full of him finally. And I do want to laud baseball before I go. They have had an outbreak with the Marlins. They seem to be reacting with a little sanity, which you don't expect from baseball. The people own it. But, the first move, now we have to cancel the season. Tom Boswell wrote in the Post, should have canceled it all along. This is so dumb. Now you have this outbreak. All these people are going to die. And, baseball's so stupid. It's like baseball did the right thing, right? Baseball has rearranged the schedule and cut the Marlins a little break scheduling wise. And continue on. I don't think, these are cases. These are not deaths. These are people who are not sick, right? They happen to test positive. So, I think that baseball is doing the right thing to try to ride it out.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, I think you can't just end the entire season because of this one thing. I think they need to kind of wait and see what happens with the team, and just postponing their games and kind of riding this out a little bit. The Nationals didn't want to go down to Florida, and that's all fine. Go ahead and take some precautions right now, but you still have time. You still have time to play the season, and let's just see what happens. So yeah, a reasoned approach, but boy, if you watch or listen to sports writers and the media, it's always like, it's always that thing about which we've talked about before. They tend to equate the cases with death, and it isn't. It's not the case.
That's right. I grew up as a sports writer and went into writing about politics and so forth. And so I probably shouldn't say this, but sports writers are the worst political writers out there. They not only have a perspective, right, but it's not a thoughtful perspective, and they make a mess of it. Like, I remember when the Nats, they passed a bill, DC passed a bill to tax the top 200 businesses in the city to build Nats Park. That's how they financed it, right? So all the big corporations, the Marses of the world, and so forth, like, sure, we'll we'll let our tax bill go up to make this money. So Chris Ballard of SI, Sports Illustrated, writes, that money could have been going for schools. No, it couldn't have, right? Because these guys wouldn't have agreed to it for schools. They agreed to it for the stadium. Okay, that's a different deal. Okay, so it's just that kind of thing. They just don't understand how things work, and they spout off. And it's the same with the coaches out there who do it too. So.
All right. Well, we'll end it there. That was good. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Please, as always, stay safe, stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anybody ever tell you otherwise. God bless America, and we will see you again next week. And we're off. All right. Thank you, my friend. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.